I'm talking today with Steve Schiffman, and it is such a treat. He has such a wealth of wisdom to share with us, having trained over 500,000 sales professionals in 9,000 companies in his career. He's written 70 best-selling sales books. It's just insane how much he has to share, and it comes out with such confidence and ease. It really is a joy. We talk about everything from how to use your sales position as an agent of change when you're working with your customers. What's the right amount of background research you should be doing before you make your introductory calls? How do you find a prospect's real objection and mine it out in a way that's really comfortable for them? We even talk about what is leading to a high turnover in sales and how do you become the sales rep who really gets it and will make it. There is just so much for you in this interview. I can't wait to get started. Hi, with me today is Steve Schiffman. And Steve, with your experience in training hundreds of thousands of salespeople at this point, you have to recognize that everyone knows that one of the most important things they need to do to manage objections well is to have prepared for them. There's only maybe a dozen objections that people commonly hear. So it isn't out of line to expect that you've thought about it and how you'd respond in advance. And yet, people seem to be thrown off guard in a sales call when they're hit with an objection. Can you explain from your perspective what's going on?
Well, you know, it's not only that they're thrown off guard in a sales call, they're thrown off guard when they make a cold call, too. I mean, it amazes me that they're not prepared for the obvious. You know certain things are going to happen. For example, I'll give you just a simple example. When you see somebody for the very first time, that is, you're meeting somebody for the first time, the one thing you absolutely positively know, among other things, but the one thing you really know is they're not your customer. Right. So if they're not your customer, why not use that piece of information by saying, gee, I'm just curious. I know you're buying from XYZ company, but why aren't you buying from me? And then know how to handle a response. So it amazes me that salespeople don't pick up on what I call selling to the obvious. It's such a simple kind of response or a simple way of getting a response and creating the conversation.
So I love that intro to a new prospect. Why aren't you buying from me yet? And it opens the door to obviously an objection right off the bat at the start of your relationship. So how do you coach a sales rep to deal with that so it doesn't fire off triggers of, they're going to tell me why they hate my company?
Yeah, but actually that's not what happens. Yeah. What usually happens is they'll say, well, to tell you the truth. And they give you another answer. They'll tell you something else. They'll say, well, to tell you the truth, this is the issue. This is the problem. This is why. Because here, for example, I was with a group of account managers the other day. And I said to them, I said, and these are people who manage existing accounts. I said, do you know how they became the account in the first place?
So they haven't done a one sales analysis or, really understand what triggered somebody to become their customer to begin with.
No, they don't know. So if you don't understand how the person was acquired in the first place, or how the company was acquired, the customer was acquired, how can you possibly deal with what the reality is for them? Right. And yet they don't. They really don't. They don't know, for example, how the person made the decision. So for example, when you want to know who made the decision, the typical salesperson says, well, who besides you made the decision, or did you make the decision? Which never really gets a good answer. But if you ask how and why the decision was made, the who will emerge. So it's a lot easier to say that than it is to have this other discussion which goes nowhere.
So I like that you can use the intelligence that you get from finding out why customers do business with you to then, quote unquote, solve the problems of the ones that aren't doing business with you when they tell you why. Well, instead of it being an objection, really it's a problem to be solved, right?
Well, I got to actually go a little against that because I'll tell you why. I don't think there's a problem.
Okay.
The average problem or the obvious thing that most salespeople face is the status quo. Yeah. In other words, if you're selling paper to somebody, they buy paper from somebody.
Yeah.
So why aren't they buying from you? It's the status quo. It's what they're doing now that seems to work for them. That's the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So you've got to say to yourself, what is it that I bring to the table? So the answer that I have for this is that what salespeople really are doing are asking people what they do, how they do it, when they do it, where they do it, who they do it with, why they're doing it that way. And then our objective is to help them do it better.
Okay.
If I can help you do something better, you're going to buy from me. If all I'm doing is offering the same thing that everybody else has, I'm a commodity. And I'm a seamless commodity at that because no one's thinking about me until I walk in. Sales, by its very nature, is somewhat absurd. I mean, think about it. We walk in, knock on a door, say, hey, you ought to buy from me. And they say, why? And we don't have a good answer for that because, well, because I'm a nice guy. But that everybody's a nice guy.
Yeah. What's interesting about the comment that you just made is that I hear that really the most challenging objection for most people are money objections. Your price too high, I can't afford it. But really what you're saying is the most challenging objection is the status quo. What I'm doing today is working great for me.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the fact is, why would you change? A salesperson is an agent of change. That's really what they have to do. If you looked at selling a little differently than the way people talk about it, what we're trying to do is get people to use our product or service. That's what we want them to do. Right. In order to do that, we've got to make a recommendation, not a proposal, a recommendation that suggests that. And it suggests that based upon the information that we get that says, now that I understand why you're using this product, I can help you do this thing better.
Okay.
If I can't do that, I'm not going to get the sale. Why should somebody change?
Okay. Now, how much of this, Steve, do you believe a sales rep needs to have discovered or researched in advance versus that is the purpose of their call, is to do that research?
Yeah, that's a great question. That really is a great question. And I get such mixed reaction on this when I train. Okay. So people say to me, well, I spend hours researching. And I go, well, just out of curiosity, what do you find? Well, I get to the website. I go, and then what do you find? Well, the mission statement. I said, what does that do for you? I mean, does it tell you anything, really? The reality is that many salespeople spend so much time researching, and then they call up and can't get the appointment anyway.
Right.
So in a way, I'm not for a lot of research. Yeah, you want to know the company. I guess you should know the name, how to spell it. It'd be nice if you knew where they're located, so when you go there, you won't get lost. Yeah. But honestly, I think they spend so much time trying to figure out who they're going to talk to and what they're going to say. I had a company a long time ago that did so much research. They came in with a dossier that really said, this is what you need. And when they delivered it, people said, what, are you kidding? We don't need that. We need something else. And so it didn't work. It never worked for them. And I think we overplay that research piece.
Okay. Yeah, you don't need to have all the answers going in.
I don't think you do. I think if you ask the right questions. Yeah. See, the problem is salespeople are taught to listen, right? That's what they say. Salespeople don't listen. But the reality, But the reality is, it isn't that they don't listen. They don't ask the right questions in the first place.
Okay.
So they're listening to nothing.
Well, and I like your suggestion that the useful research to do up front is your one sales analysis about why customers buy from you, because that gives you the probing questions you need to be asking with your prospects.
Right, to get more products sold. Because you can't force somebody to buy something more than they need. So you've got to understand how they purchase in the first place and what opportunities do you have within that. But you got to understand the purchasing process. See, we are great at teaching people how to sell. Mm-hmm. We don't teach people how to buy. And we don't teach salespeople how people buy. Okay. So the end result is you get somebody who goes in there who knows how to sell, in theory, but doesn't know how to buy. And of course, my camera goes right in on me when I say that.
Yeah, a close-up.
Yeah, it's close-up. Yeah, so do I. Sometimes.
Okay. It's to emphasize the point you just made.
Right. Just on clue.
So 2 questions as a follow-up. 1, how do you teach sales reps how people buy? And is there a profile of a sales professional that is really good at managing objections?
Yeah, look, the fact is, let's go to the objections piece. Why don't we know what to say when we know they're going to say it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's obvious to me. It's so obvious. But here's what they don't get. When you answer the question or answer the first objection or the first issue, it will bounce to another one. And it's the second objection that really matters. So, for example, if someone says to me, well, price is a problem, and I'll go, well, tell me what you mean by that. I just say it. Just tell me what you mean by that. They'll say, well, here's the issue. We've been buying from them for a long time, and all of a sudden they tell you another story. See, people communicate in stories. It had nothing to do with the price. All the time telling, well, I'm buying from this guy. So, well, okay, I got that. Now, why are you buying from him? Well, because he offers this. And all of a sudden, there's a different discussion. See, people just answer the one question instead of really engaging the person in understanding where that question came from, or where that objection came from. So that's the first thing that I think is important. Okay. The second thing is in terms of profile. Salesperson, a lot of sales, and this sounds negative, happens through happenstance. I mean, we show up and it's the right timing. So I question whether or not there are great salespeople. I'm not going to minimize it, but if you really looked at it, probably 20% of the salespeople really do well. That is, they understand the question. That's why there's such a high turnover in sales, because people don't really understand the whole sales process. The sales process they typically do is open up, throw up, repeat it, throw up, ask them questions, do a presentation that's going to knock them out, and then try to close, with 187 tips on closing. Right. It doesn't work. It never worked. Never worked. It still doesn't work.
Okay. So is there, I'm not going to ask you for the silver bullet because we're all grown up enough to know that there's not one silver bullet. But in terms of the turnover, what can a sales rep do so that they get it, so that they're not one of the masses that just keep doing that rinse and repeat of a poor sales process?
Right. They need to understand that the steps of a sale are interdependent. So, for example, if I meet you for the first time, my only objective is to get back the second time, because the second meeting is more important than the first meeting. The third meeting is more important than the second meeting. And so if I think about it that way, and I think about the logical progression, so if I can go through the steps properly, and they're interdependent, and I advance my sale through what I've learned in the first meeting, second meeting, third meeting, first of all, I create rapport. I get to the person to trust me, but also I start to understand them better. The biggest mistake is trying to sell in the first or second appointment. You're not going to do it that way unless you've got something that's just a commodity and it doesn't make any difference. But if you're selling anything of substance, you really got to think about the steps and the time. Now, let's talk about time for a second. The longer the sale takes out of its normal sales cycle, the less likely it's to happen. So time becomes very important. Most people don't talk about that. They don't use time as a predictor, as an indicator of their own success. Okay.
So can you elaborate more? Because I liked the point that you were making, that as you focus on getting more sales calls, basically getting more permission to continue to interact, prospects investing in you too, and they're not going to waste their time. So if they're investing in you, that's a good sign. So your last comment must mean compress the time that's happening in? Or?
Well, it's a collaborative sale, first of all. I want my prospect to be involved with me in what I'm going to do. In fact, the more complex the sale, the more the prospect has to help you. You can't do it yourself. You really can't sell by yourself. Everybody thinks they can. They can't. Second thing is time. The longer the sale takes out of its normal sales cycle, whatever that is, normal sales cycle, the less likely it is to happen. So you need to understand what your sales cycle is, and you have to get to that point, knowing you're not going to rush it, but also you don't want to extend it. Now, the longer a sale takes, period, the less likely it is to happen. So what happens is the average salesperson doesn't connect with that. They'll say, well, I'll call you back in 2 weeks. They call back 2 weeks, set the meeting for another week, set another meeting for another week. And now, all of a sudden, it's 6 months later, and there's no interest anymore. They've got to create a sense of urgency.
You need to get that momentum going.
Right. Most salespeople can't do it.
Okay. So can we circle back, because your advice is so spot on. How does a great sales rep deal with the status quo as an objection? So could you give us an example of how you would walk through making that call?
There are 4 words that I like to use. First of all, the salesperson has to have insight into the customer. So they've got to understand the customer, and they've got to understand what the customer's doing, not what they need, what they do now, why they do it, how they do it. Second thing is they have to be innovative. A salesperson has to be able to separate themselves out from the rest of the competition, because they look the same. I mean, we all kind of look the same, all said and done. So we have to separate ourselves out. The problem is...
Do you have a tip on how to do that?
Yeah, sure. Change the way you look. Don't look like every other salesperson. I mean, every salesperson today doesn't wear a tie, doesn't dress, doesn't, I have a little slogan up here that says, get up, dress up, and show up, and never give up. I mean, it says to me, really basically, is change something about yourself. Don't be like everybody else.
Okay.
And in your product. So you've got to have insight, got to be innovative. We also have to be bold in what we say. Most salespeople are taught not to say things negatively. You know, got to be positive, got to be positive. Well, sometimes you have to say, you know, this is better. We're afraid to say that. And the last thing is we've got to be an advocate. They have to believe that we are looking out for their best interest. So we have to be an advocate for them. That is to say, if I don't think that this particular recommendation is right for them, I don't make it. Okay. I'd rather walk away. Now, when I walk away, they're going to say to me, why are you walking away? And I said, well, here's my reaction to this. They're going to correct me and say, well, and this is very important. They correct you and say, oh, well, if you did it this way, it would work. Bingo, I've got it.
Okay. Okay. Now, do you recommend a sales rep be that explicit that I don't think I'm the best choice for you because?
Sure. Okay. Sure. If you're real, I mean, if it's real, I mean, you wouldn't say it I don't believe in lying. I don't believe in being phony about it. Okay. But if honestly, it's not the right presentation, it's not the right material, it's not the right product, then why are you selling it? It's just going to come back to you. Okay. So why sell it that way? Why not be real about the whole situation and be sincere? I think one of the key aspects about selling is being sincere in terms of what you're trying to accomplish for the customer or prospect.
Okay. And you think that'll work here in the Midwest where we're all worried about being polite and nice?
Well, you and I both know that throughout the country, everybody's polite and nice, supposedly. But in reality, it's business. Right. And so we have to get down to the business part. So, and I've been selling now for 38 years and training for 38 years. 500,000 sales reps around the country, around the world, actually. Yeah. So what I've learned is it's universal. There are certain things that are just universal. I can train in the Philippines or in the UK or in Kiev or Syria, which I've done. Not Syria, I'm sorry, Jordan. The reality is that it's all the same. It all comes out the same.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. So, Steve, what is the most important thing you want to leave our audience with so that they can immediately on their next call be more effective with handling objections?
Yeah, you just said it. It makes sense. The sale has to make sense to the individual. If it doesn't make sense to you, and if it doesn't make sense to the individual, it's not going to happen. Why would they buy? They're not going to buy something that doesn't make sense to them. So you've got to prove that it makes sense. You've got to illustrate to them, these are the things that are going to happen. These are the things that are going to help them. And it's going to make sense. That's how I close. I simply say, you know, it makes sense to me. I did a sale a couple of weeks ago with a client, and I simply said to him at the end of the meeting, you know, I think this makes sense. We do it. And they said, okay. And I said, let's pick dates now. And I did. And that's the key. That really is the key. It's not as complicated as the books teach.
Right. And it's not about shoving it down their throat. It's about truly believing this makes sense.
You've got to. You know, I've written 70 books on sales. And so you've got to be able to say to somebody, this makes sense. Mm-hmm. If you can't say that, and if it doesn't, then what are you pushing it for? Go away. Go find somebody else.
I love it. Wow, this was a lot of great intelligence packed into a little time frame. So thanks so much for that, Steve.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for joining us. Don't you just feel smarter already? I tell you, with all of the interviews that I've done for Sales Mastery, most days I feel like I can conquer the world. If you want to make sure to catch all of our interviews with chief sales officers, experts, top sales producers, connect with us on our YouTube channel right here. And if you want access to all of the resources that we have for you at Sales Mastery, you can connect with us right here. Our goal is to make it fun and to make it simple for you to stay on the leading edge of selling. So connect with Sales Mastery for the smart way for you to become your best.